Workforce. Today's timely topic and focus on military veteran employment is particularly important as discussions and uncertainty related to federal layoffs dominate conversations, as we'll hear from our esteemed panelists this afternoon. Federal layoffs stand to have an outsized impact on the military veteran community, with a significant proportion of the federal government having served in the military. We're in for some very helpful and timely insights from our panelists today, and I am especially honored to welcome Acting Secretary Ross Cohen with us this afternoon to kick off with some opening remarks. And just a little housekeeping before I turn it over to Secretary Cohen. If you all run into any technical difficulties, please reach out to the American Vets Group account via the chat function on the below part of your screen. We have our team working behind the scenes to keep the train moving down the track, and they can help with any technical issues you all might have. And so without further ado, I'm honored to introduce Acting Secretary Ross Cohen. Secretary Cohen is a U.S. Army veteran and currently serves as the Acting Secretary with the Maryland Department of Veterans and Military Families. Post 9/11, Secretary Cohen enlisted in the Army as an infantry paratrooper, serving one deployment from 2003 and 4 to the Afghan-Pakistani border. Following his time in the Army, he earned his master's in public affairs from Princeton University. Before joining the Maryland Department of Veterans and Military Families, he was the Chief External Affairs Officer with Blue Star Families, a leading military nonprofit. His earlier experience in the veteran and military family empowerment space includes executive director roles with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation's Hiring Our Heroes and J.P. Morgan Chase's Veteran Jobs Mission. He's worked on presidential, gubernatorial, and congressional campaigns, as well as on county and statewide issues in Washington State. Secretary Cohen, thank you so much for joining this afternoon, and I'll turn the mic over to you, sir.
Thank you, Ben. I really appreciate the introduction. Thank you to American Veterans Group for hosting today's conversation, to my fellow presenters, and to all the folks watching wherever you are. You'll notice my background is a little different than the other folks. That's because I'm actually dialing in here from a hotel room in Ocean City, Maryland. Earlier this morning, I presented to the Disabled American Veterans Maryland Department for their annual conference. And so I wasn't going to be able to make it back home or to the office in time. So they put me up in a hotel room so I could be here with you with Wi-Fi. So hopefully that will stand in good stead. Normally, Ben, I saw that you in your bio that you are a Annapolis grad. If that is correct, that is where our headquarters is, right by the Naval, very close to Naval Academy. Beautiful town. We love spending time on Main Street. It's a great place to work. And it's graduation week this week, so it's great to see all the family and loved ones crowding into the area. As Ben said, I am the acting secretary of the Maryland Department of Veterans and Military Families. I come bringing greetings from our governor, Wes Moore, who is himself an Army veteran, who also deployed to Afghanistan back in 05-06. Governor Moore is a passionate champion of both veterans and military families. I'll talk a little bit more about what he's done, but one thing I want to flag is that we are, because of legislation that was championed last year by the governor, we are the only state in the country to have a Department of Veterans Affairs renamed as the Department of Veterans and Military Families. And that shows sort of the purpose and the passion that the governor learned from his deployment. And as so many of us know, that when one person deploys, the family is really the one who's got to pick up the slack and behind. We actually we're privileged about a year and a half ago, I think it was February of last year, we partnered with Eric and the Hiring Our Heroes team to have a great military spouse networking reception at the governor's mansion in Annapolis. Our team itself got 2 hires from that event, which was great. And I'll talk more about those partnerships later. But in the meantime, I want to say, as Ben said in the bio, in my introduction, I've worked in the space a long time. The veteran and military family space is one that is very, very personal to me, and especially when we hit these moments of transition. And this is one of those moments. We are all watching very closely as federal agencies weigh very significant workforce reductions. And while the outcomes remain uncertain, we know enough to say that veterans will be impacted. According to the best estimates we've seen, about 30% of federal employees are veterans. And in Maryland, which Moody's has said will be the most per capita state impacted by the personnel cuts and the DOJA and the reductions in force from the new administration, we have 23,000 veterans alone who work for the federal government, and that does not count the many Marylanders who work in federal agencies based in DC and Virginia. It also doesn't count the contractors who work on federal contractors in the region, in those jurisdictions. So we know that these cuts will personally and immediately negatively impact tens of thousands of veterans and their families in our state. And there are a little more than 350,000 veterans in Maryland. So we're talking about a very significant portion. In our state, we're already beginning to see some early signs. The veteran unemployment rate in the state is still low. As of April, it's about 3.7%, which is a little above where it was this time last year, still a little below the non-veteran state average. But we are anecdotally beginning sort of more and more to see the signs that this could be changing soon. We are hearing more through our constituency services team, through the trust fund that the state of Maryland, through our department, runs for veterans and National Guard members and their families who need emergency one-time loans. More folks reaching out for help, for emergency assistance, for help getting their VA ratings upgraded, which we have a team of about 25 that helps veterans and their families do that. I spoke last week with a federal colleague. I won't say which department, but she has a lot of engagement in this particular field. And she said that the numbers are not showing up yet. Unemployment numbers are not showing up yet in the official unemployment rates, but they are seeing increased numbers of veterans in the region losing their jobs, especially as you'd predict in the federal government, federal contracting, and the education sectors. As you're seeing a lot of cuts to higher education. Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore here in Maryland took some very significant cuts, got to lay off thousands of folks. So given all this, I am not an economist. I was not trained that way, and I'm not speaking for any official Department of Labor or economics, but I think we can safely say that we will see the veteran unemployment rate tick up in the months to come, which is, at least in Maryland, which again, I think is going to be one of the harder hit states, given our obvious proximity to the capital. And that is disappointing to see. Back in 2011, the unemployment rate for post 9/11 veterans was 12%. For wounded warriors, it was close to 30%. Thanks to the great work of organizations like Hiring Our Heroes and VetJobs, in close partnership with the private and public sectors, those numbers were driven dramatically down. And today, I believe it's around 4% unemployment rate for post 9/11 veterans. But we are now dealing with a lot of headwinds, and it's concerning to see that those numbers might unfortunately go back up. But we're responding. We're doing the best we can in a challenging economic time. First thing we're doing, and for Maryland, we are proud to offer veterans and military spouses a fair shot in state employment. As you know, too often veterans employment and military spouse experiences do not translate well to civilian resumes and to the civilian workforce. Although organizations like Hiring Our Heroes, I know, do a great job of helping bridge that gap. But what we are doing in state government, like many states, we offer a sort of 10-point bonus to veterans applying for state jobs. We became the first state last year to offer the same opportunity to active duty military spouses. So since that went into effect in the second half of last year, we've hired 43 military spouses into state government jobs. It's not a huge number, but we're just getting started, and we're continuing to get the word out about that opportunity, and we're excited to see where it goes. We are talking with Eric and his team about potentially hosting events that are focused on, of course, the Maryland veteran and military family connected community, with maybe a special focus on trying to engage recently let go federal employees and contractors. And Eric and his team have been great to be open to those conversations, and we're excited to move forward with that as we kind of get further into the year. And as I said, we've accelerated our disbursements from our Maryland Veterans Trust Fund, which is our emergency financial assistance program that helps veterans and Guard members and their families who are at risk of missing payments on their homes, their cars, their utilities. We can offer one-time loans kind of in the range of $5,000 to $15,000 to help them get over that hump. And we're seeing a bigger increase of demand on that. And we're our money is taxpayer money, so we're trying to steward it carefully. So my call to action is really, it's a broad one. So let's get ahead of this together with the public and private and nonprofit sectors. Let's continue to coordinate across sectors to make sure that veterans and their families are not left navigating this moment alone. Let's keep pushing for smarter hiring, faster access to benefits, and better systems of support. And let's keep our focus on where it belongs in delivering stability, opportunity, and dignity to those who've served. So thank you for having me, Ben and team. Thanks for everything you do and for your partnership in helping to meet this moment. Thanks.
Thank you, Secretary Cohen, for your time and those remarks. We'll now move into the panel portion of today's event. We will let our panel lead the conversation, and we will have time at the end for Q&A. If you have any questions you would like to ask our panel, please don't hesitate to drop those in the Q&A function throughout the discussion, and we will turn to them at the end. Now, to introduce our panelists, I'm happy to welcome Jen Harrison-Doss, who is the Senior Director of Talent Acquisition at Visa, and Milinda Rau, who is a Training and Outreach Specialist with VetJobs. And welcome back for his second VetSuccess panel appearance, our friend Eric Eversole, President of Hiring Our Heroes. So thank you all for joining us today. And I guess I'll kick it off to Eric Eversole. Eric, can you describe the impact recent federal layoffs are having on the military veteran workforce? And if so, why are these layoffs of particular significance to the veteran community?
Well, Ben, thanks for that question. Thanks for having me. I'm glad I'm the experienced person on the panel. That's always great. I think Secretary Cohen really summed it up nicely with both the data as to what we're seeing and what we're not seeing in the numbers. And we do know that about 30% of all federal workers are veterans. And so these downsizing cuts are in fact affecting a lot of veterans. They're not showing up in the numbers yet, at least on the kind of national numbers from unemployment offices. Veteran unemployment as a whole has remained fairly steady at about 4% at the end of April. But I think there are a couple of things that we need to keep an eye on. And look, part of the reason they're not showing up in the numbers is that most of the impacted federal workers took severance packages. And as a result of taking those severance packages, they're not going to end up in the unemployment numbers. It doesn't mean they're not going to end up in the numbers at some point in the near future. And I think that's where we have to be mindful of where we are now, that to the extent that we can prevent that shift to unemployment, that's going to be critically important for our success. I will tell you that what we're seeing on the ground, and for those of you that aren't familiar with Hiring Our Heroes, we run the nation's largest skill bridge program on active duty basis, as well as hiring events across the country, mostly on military installation. We're seeing about a 30% increase in veteran attendees at these hiring events. And so in the past, where veteran attendees for our hiring events maybe accounted for 10 to 15%, that number has jumped up to 25%. And the biggest reason, and when we asked the question, half of those increased, or those veterans who are attending, are in fact workers who have been impacted by federal cuts. Some of them are federal workers. Some of them are working on federal contracts. So we are seeing kind of this engagement behind the scenes. They're not appearing in the unemployment numbers, but we're certainly seeing them in our pipeline to get in front of the pending unemployment challenge. And so we're working aggressively with companies across the country on helping find pathways for these federal workers who have lost their jobs and careers. And we've worked with great partners like Visa, who are really stepping into the void to find, when they exist, opportunities. So I think I'll probably stop there.
No, those are great insights. Thank you very much for that. And it's great to see, you're, as far as this panel goes, you're a veteran of veterans. So we really appreciate everything your team does at Hiring Our Heroes for veterans and their families. Next question, for Jen, what industries stand to benefit from the influx of newly available military veteran talent?
Yeah, thank you so much. And Eric, thank you for the kind comment. It's an interesting economy right now. Overall, unemployment figures are still pretty low. And to earlier points made, veteran employment still remains quite low overall, and it has been basically since around COVID. But we do know that there are lots of people who are still hiring, even with the uncertainty in the economy around tariffs and investment in AI, et cetera. So some of those top industries that are hiring right now are healthcare, the energy industry, both renewable and oil and gas. Of course, my industry, technology and AI, doing lots of hiring right now. Finance and professional services, logistics and transportation, and then due to the CHIPS Act, lots of advanced manufacturing and semiconductors. So there are a lot of great industries that are very diverse that I think a variety of federal workers could target in their searches and be able to find a home. And I think even more positively for those federal workers who are military connected, you know, Visa was late to the game in creating our military talent program. I left Amazon to start Visa's program in 2023, and it launched in FY24. The reality is that other companies have built these military talent programs, and the growth of these programs was super large from like 2011 to 2017 when military unemployment was at its highest. So I think veterans do have a bit of an advantage over their federal counterparts who are non-veterans because they have an instant path in to some of these incredible organizations. You just look at the top 10 employers in the US, and every single one has a dedicated military hiring team. So there's a lot of hope amongst these numbers as well.
Thank you for that. That's great to hear. And thanks to you and your team at Visa for all they're doing for military veterans. We've definitely seen the commitment there, especially during these times. For Milinda, how can military veteran-focused nonprofits support veterans impacted by federal layoffs? And what national, regional, or state resources are available to them?
So let me speak first to what nonprofits can do and are doing to support veterans that are impacted right now. First of all, many of us are realigning our coaching and training content so that it directly addresses how veterans can transition their federally focused package and job search to a more civilian focused job search. There are 7.1 million jobs available in the US right now, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And yes, the vast majority of those are in the private sector. So if you have been in the federal workforce for a period of time, or you were heading that direction as a transitioning service member, we can help you translate that information so that it's more focused on the private sector. The other part of that equation is focusing some of your time and your effort on upskilling and reskilling. Now, this is an effort to learn or refresh skills. So you can refresh current skills that you have developed over a military career, or even if it's a first enlistment, and rebuild those skills so that they're more in line with the current trends that are going on, especially when you're talking about the more technical industries like technology, the energy industry, engineering, that type of thing. You need to make sure your skills are current and they represent an expertise that you have learned. And then you've got the reskill. Maybe you want to head in a slightly different direction that is adjacent to your current set of skills. You need to make sure you are reskilling so that you show a competence that will be obvious to an employer, that you can demonstrate not only that you have the knowledge, but you can actually act on that knowledge. And there are a lot of nonprofit organizations that provide access to these training platforms that can do those things for you. It allows us to do what Ross said get ahead of this by helping you be proactive as a veteran when you're looking at transition, whether it's 6 months down the road or 18 months down the road. Start thinking about how you're going to reorient your skills and think outside of the box. It is a natural progression for many veterans to try to get into the federal workforce. But there are so many industries, private industries, that are well aligned with the skills that many service members develop over a period of time in the military, whether it's that first enlistment or a career. So that's what nonprofits are doing right now is we are reorienting our training and our coaching efforts so that it helps our transitioning service members capitalize on this and move in a new direction, empowered with the knowledge that they're prepared for those private sector jobs.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. Going back to Eric. Eric, how do we see these budget cuts and layoffs impacting active military members who are preparing to transition to civilian life in their career prospects and or resources?
Yeah, Ben, I think it's a great question. As many people, as you know, I'm a recovering lawyer, so I'm going to give you the lawyer answer, which is it depends. It is, there's a lot of things going on right now, not only related to the layoffs, but also with the overall economy. And I think that as Jen referenced, there's a lot of uncertainty in the marketplace right now, and that's creating some headwinds as we look to find homes. The reality is, companies are being very cautious as a whole that we see in their hiring practices right now. I suspect a lot of your participants, as they work with companies, are being cautious, and that can really change quite rapidly. I don't have a crystal ball. I'm, as Secretary Cohen said, he's not an economist. I'm not an economist. But we are expecting that if we can get past some of the near-term economic challenges, that we're going to see good growth opportunities going forward. I will tell you that regardless of those, and I think where we have to think long-term and really talks about kind of builds upon what Milinda said, is that regardless of some of the near-term challenges, the reality is we don't have enough workers to fill the open jobs in this country right now. And that's only going to get worse. We have a demographic cliff that hits May of this year, where we have fewer high school graduates, 300,000 fewer entering the workforce. We have a growing, our aging workforce population with growing retirements. How many of the federal workers are just going to stay retired? That's to be determined. But the one thing Milinda touched on that I think is really important is, we are seeing a workforce that is evolving very quickly from a skill set point of view, not just the displaced federal workers, but workers as a whole. And we need, workers, in order to stay competitive in a 21st century American workforce, are going to have to adapt. And that means their skill sets are going to have to adapt, and they're going to have to be willing to look at new pathways into opportunities. And so we are focusing, and I know a lot of corporations that we work with are focusing on how do we create the right skill sets, not a 2-year training course, but how do we give service members and veterans the right skill sets in 4 to 6 weeks so that they can bridge that opportunity to do something that may be a little bit different than what they've been doing now. And so we are seeing a significant emergence of that, both in the IT and the cyber and AI environments. That's going to continue. And if you're one of those displaced federal workers, I would highly encourage you to really look at some online courses that will give you some of these introductory skill sets to make you competitive, whether it's AI or cyber or whatever it is, so you understand what that future landscape looks like. So I didn't answer the question at all, Ben. So I don't know what the long-term impacts are, but I think at the end of the day, it's going to be something that depends a lot of what the economy looks like. And importantly, how quickly any of our displaced federal workers who are re-entering the workforce undertake the very significant work of getting career ready.
Yep. I think it's two-sided, and totally makes sense. Appreciate those comments. Very helpful. Going back to Jen on this, are there any adjustments that your team has made to your recruitment strategies or processes as the potential for more military veteran talent becomes available on the corporate job market?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm happy to answer it. And then I'd like to also pivot, if I can, to give some tips for job seekers, because it takes two to make a hire. At Visa, we've joined HOH in their virtual career fairs for federal employees. We've supported a couple. We also did a Service to Success resume review event where we invited federal workers who are veterans or military spouses to receive one-on-one resume coaching from different recruiters across Visa who volunteered for the event. In our monthly webinar series, we have invited federal employees to email the military talent program leaders after they've applied for roles at Visa, specifically self-IDing as federal workers in the subject line of their email so we can prioritize and drive visibility with hiring teams. So those are just a few of the things that we've done. We're still trying to find our way in this unique time, and we're going to keep getting creative and innovative to try to help these candidates, best access our hiring teams and open roles. But on the candidate side, I think it's really important that federal job seekers understand that their combined federal and military experience is a really powerful asset, and that what recruiters like my team are seeking are specific skills that they typically have, leading diverse teams, decision-making under pressure, managing through ambiguity, plus the core skills that they have in whatever their specific job functions are. But there are some things that they ought to do to help better position themselves. And I think the biggest one is understanding that civilian resumes are a different language. Civilian recruiters spend on average 6 to 10 seconds scanning a resume. And so federal style resumes are not going to work in the private sector, full stop. And so these job seekers should be prepared to need to revamp their resume. They should keep them to 1 to 2 pages in length, which is very different than a federal resume. They should look for the keywords in the job descriptions for the roles they're applying for and make sure that those keywords are reflected in their resumes. And they should really be able to quantify the impact that they made in their roles using metrics and data to show what that impact was. I think it's also important that they understand civilian hiring rhythm is very different than federal hiring rhythm. The private sector can move quite fast as we move quickly to fill roles. And so the other thing that's different is civilian advancement is less about time served in a role and more about results and visibility. So as folks begin to interview, they really need to think about their impact and their achievements and less about how long they were in a role or what their job title was or their GS rating or whatever. It's all about what did you do, because we're trying to determine if what you did there can be done here in a successful way. Like I said, though, earlier, the good news is so many of these organizations that these folks are likely targeting have veteran recruiting programs or military spouse recruiting programs. And so there's built-in infrastructure to help these folks make that transition. The other thing I will share is that companies that have military recruiting programs understand the concept of transition. They know that military veterans leaving the military have a transition period, and there's going to be things they may not know and skill bridges or skill gaps that need to be bridged. Federal workers are making a transition again, And these civilian employers are going to be able to understand that and help them navigate that process. But the key, just like I advise military spouses, is you've got to self-ID. Just because you have a government agency on your resume doesn't mean a civilian employer is necessarily going to make that connection. So in your objective or your statement profile, displaced federal workers seeking new opportunity, blah, blah, blah. You got to call it out so we can go find you. Again, same advice I give to spouses, but this is just another transition. And I think there are a lot of companies that are really well positioned to help people through it.
Yeah.
I'm here for optimism. I think you can tell that's my approach always.
I feel very inspired just being, on this panel with you. So it's great. And thank you so much for all the great stuff that you are doing and how you're thinking about this issue that we're facing. Milinda, going back to you, what are some of the unique challenges that veteran employees laid off from federal positions may face as they potentially pivot to positions in the private sector or state government?
Well, I think one of the key challenges they have is creativity. Let's be creative in how you approach which direction you want to head into. It's one of those things, and this is in a class that we are currently developing and we're going to be releasing next month, is trying to get them to think outside of the box when they think about what they want to do and making that pivot into the private sector workforce. The job titles may sound very differently, even though the job functions are very similar. So you have to broaden your aperture a little bit and think a little creatively. And that's one of the things we're going to teach them how to do. You also need to tap into the resources out there to help you make that transition. And the inclination is not always to ask for that assistance. Maybe you think, well, I've got all these skills. Why do I need to ask for help to make this transition? The reality is, it's a lot easier to get this done if you tap into one of the many of the support organizations that are out there. The IRS actually tells us that there are about 45,000 registered nonprofits whose focus of effort is helping those military affiliated residents, whether it's through employment support, mental health support, financial assistance, training, job training, all of it. There's 45,000 of them. And many of them are locally based. Some of them are associated with corporate America. Some of them are nationally based, like we are, and like Hiring Our Heroes and Hire Heroes USA, nationally based organizations. So tap into those resources, get that assistance. Something to remember, for the average candidate, it's going to take them about 6 months to find a job. 6 months. And on average, you're going to submit between 30 and 50 applications before you get that first interview. So you need to keep trying, but failure is always a part of trying. And you need to tap into the resources that are available to help you so that you can maybe shave some time off of that timeline and a few applications off of that application list. You need to kind of focus on 5 areas of effort. Networking is number 1. Networking. It should be 60% of your effort. And then you need to start targeting your approach. You need to target your job search. Look at specific organizations you want to target. And then you've got to target your resume and your cover letter. You cannot submit a generic package for any job, You have to have a digital footprint. You have to engage digitally in today's job market. You've got to utilize those digital platforms. Perseverance. You got to stick to it. The jobs are out there. We can help match you with those jobs. Tap into those support organizations that can help you. We will help you successfully achieve those career goals and make that transition.
That's great insights. And very, very helpful. I think, from working and getting to know everyone on our panel, how important it is if you can't envision success for yourself, how can we expect that of our military veterans? And I think with that is, you don't know what you don't know. And so speaking to folks on this panel or networking, et cetera, is that you can see, who have made those transitions, who are 3-4 steps ahead of you, maybe in their professional journeys or what have you, can give you more vision, as you're making that transition yourself. Totally makes sense. And I think we've gone over this broadly, but I think, Eric, I'll turn this over to you, and then we can, any other panelists that wants to answer it can do it as well. Military spouses and families. I like what the secretary said, about his department are military veterans and their families. And I know that each of the panelists here today are just as committed to, the spouses and the families as are the specific veterans. Eric, how are the layoffs impacting military spouses, or family employment, as you say?
Yeah, look, Ben, let me be clear. Anytime there's uncertainty, kind of things like employment, as well as the ability of the service member who's transitioning out to find opportunities, that uncertainty makes it really challenging for military families. There was the Department of Defense yesterday released its active duty military spouse survey. Let me just tell you, it wasn't good news. And I'm happy to make sure you share a link, but what I saw over a 20-year period was they went back and looked at data, 2 record lows, record low of the number of spouses who are wanting to stay in the military, and record low number of spouses in the last 20 years who are satisfied with the military quality of life. And those 2 lows led to 1 record high, which is the record high in the number of military spouses who are recommending not staying in service. And a lot of this is driven by economic uncertainty. There was a 10-point drop in that survey compared to a couple of years ago when they did the survey the last time, a 10-point drop in the number of families, military spouses, who said they're living comfortably. And so this is a national security issue. Military families don't feel economically secure. And look, I want to be clear about something. This has impacted more than just military families over the last couple of years. There's been a lot of uncertainty in the marketplace. But as we try to maintain an all-volunteer force, we're going to have to find ways to help empower military spouses on their career journeys, because we have too many military families that are relying upon a single income, and we have to figure it out. And the good news is I know we have committed partners at the Department of Defense. We have great partners, again, like Visa and other organizations that are working aggressively to empower military spouses with career opportunities. But if we don't figure this out pretty soon, we're going to face some real headwinds when it comes to retention and recruiting of future service members. And so we have to figure it out. The federal layoffs are just amplifying some of the challenges related to that. I mean, but this is a much broader issue that we have to tackle as a private public sector commitment to our military and our military families.
Yep. Totally understand. Anyone else from the panel like to add some comments?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a military spouse. I followed my husband around for 10 years while I worked hard to maintain my own career. And it's through the graciousness of my former employer, Amazon, that said I could work virtually in 2014, that I still have my career. Military spouses shouldn't have to rely on graciousness and luck of someone saying yes. I don't think we speak enough about the national security imperative that military spouse unemployment means. I don't think it's, military spouses have been underemployed or unemployed, at higher rates than their civilian counterparts for as long as I've been working in this space. And when we put a concentrated effort together around 2011 to get veteran employment low, we did it. We figured it out. I mean, it's been lower than the non-veteran rate since 2019. Okay. We can't seem to crack this nut on military spouses. And I think our approach should change, and the focus should be, this is a national security imperative. And I'll just speak very transparently. My husband retired just a few months ago because I demanded it. I was tired of the military lifestyle and its impact on my family. He didn't want to leave. He probably would have served another 15 years if I didn't put my foot down and say, we need a different style of life here. I think there are so many veterans who want to stay in and they want to serve and they have more to give, but they can't. And we should feel as a nation a great deal of shame that we have not figured this out, that we have military service members putting our national security in their hands, and then some days they can't even make ends meet. We should all feel deeply, deeply uncomfortable with this, and we should connect it, I think, to the risk it presents to our national security. I guess all the great skills and abilities and qualities that military spouses have, that we know they have, creativity, et cetera, all that stuff doesn't appear to be enough. So I think we need a different tactic to make sure that this imperative, gets the focus that it needs. I will say that organizations like Hiring Our Heroes have done a really good job continuing to share the message. And I see every year I go to the Military Spouse Summit, which I'll be seeing you later there, Eric. I see more new companies tapping into these military spouse efforts. Visa hired me to build a veteran program, and I said, I'm not going to build you a veteran program. I'm going to build you a military program. It needs to include spouses and reserve guard. And if that's not what you're interested in, I'm not the right candidate, right? I learned that from Hiring Our Heroes. And so again, there is still hope. There are still lots of people working hard to figure it out. And I know the solution is coming. I just don't know what it is.
Thanks, Jen. Those are really powerful words. And I was brought to this issue at an event that Eric and his team ran almost 5 or 6 years ago, and it makes total sense. And thanks to all of you for really amplifying this issue and bringing to light, and then coming up with some ways that we can actually be a part of the solution, so to speak. And I'll turn it over to Milinda on the same question. I know we have VetJobs. You also have a sister nonprofit, Military Spouse Jobs, showing the commitment in the space. And you'll probably be at the same conference, I'm sure. Milinda, any words on the layoffs impacting military spouses and family employment?
So I've seen two things happen here recently since January. Number one, there was, and I hate to use this word because I don't really like this word, but there was a sense of panic. What I thought I was secure. There had been so much work done, congressional actions, information added to the NDAA, executive orders signed to make all these inroads to connect military spouses with federal employment. And now we all kind of felt like the rug was being ripped out from underneath us. We thought there was some security there, especially those who were working remotely, so they could move with their service member. And I'm a military spouse as well. We were a military family for 31 years. So I totally get that. And we want to have those choices. So that was the first thing I saw start to happen. But then I saw this grassroots effort start to happen. And it was this groundswell of military spouses supporting each other. They were putting their words into action. They were writing letters to their congressmen. They were trying to move that needle so that those government agencies that had put those securities in place, giving them the option to work remotely, would actually enforce what they had said they were going to do. And it started to shift a little bit. Now, we can't predict what's going to happen here in the next few months. We have no idea what's going to happen. About 1% of the federal workforce are military spouses, and I think it's going to become more and more challenging for military spouses to not only maintain federal employment, but to achieve it in the first place. Even though as of, I think it was the beginning of last week, there were about 485 open jobs on usajobs.com. or .gov. So I think it's still going to be a challenge. I don't think any of us have one answer to this question. I think that it is going to continue to be one of the top issues that all of us work on continuously. And we're going to have to keep working on this continuously to move the needle. And we also need to recognize that cracking the nut, as Jen said, about military spouse employment is not about one thing. We have to address a multitude of issues. We have to address quality of life, housing, PCSing, childcare, all of those
Childcare.
childcare, because that's why we haven't cracked the nut on military spouse unemployment and underemployment. Please do not forget underemployment. So we've got to keep this in the forefront of our mind. We've got to continue to keep this on the mind of our legislators and keep working to make those changes and identify how we're actually going to solve this problem for military spouses.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, let's go to I'm going to go off some of the audience questions that I see, and we'll move it into a lightning round of sorts for the panelists if we're ready for it. So fasten your seatbelts. One of the questions I saw was around how do companies, nonprofit, how do we find these folks? How do we find these displaced individuals and market these great services from the nonprofits, market these great job opportunities from folks like Visa and Jen's team? Any tips there for the audience? We'll start with Eric, and then we'll go to Jen, and then Milinda.
Just quickly, Ben, if you please share my email contact information liberally. We'll plug you into events and other opportunities. We have a pretty significant searchable database, but I would let's connect with those companies, and we'll certainly help you find some of those displaced federal workers.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'll just add, Milinda shared a staggering statistic, 45,000 organizations geared to helping veterans in all walks of life and periods of their lives. I've heard it referred to as the sea of goodwill. I think we can acknowledge that it can be very overwhelming. There are so many resources available, so which one do you go to? And my advice is always to look at companies that you want to work for, look at their military programs, and then see which organizations they partner with to make your life easier. As you network with your colleagues and peers and friends, find out which organizations helped them make the best connections. I think Milinda also talked about networking. The best way to get a job is through people that remains unchanged for any job, any person, any planet. So networking is really going to be critical there. For companies that want to tap into this pool of talent, I make the same recommendation. There are wonderful organizations. Visa's #1 choice, of course, is Hiring Our Heroes. I met with Eric on my 3rd week in my role and said, "You're paramount to helping me scale this program quickly." There are other great organizations that do similar work with different focuses in technology, et cetera. You just have to do the work to find them. But again, the good news is that there are so many options and so many resources. If this occurred 20 years ago, the answer would be very different.
Great insights.
So
Milinda?
one thing I would mention is the National Guard has what is called the National Guard Employment Network, and every single state has people on the ground that are specifically tasked with matching veterans, whether they have been displaced because of their National Guard service or they've been displaced in another way. They have a network across each state that will help them connect with companies that are committed to hiring veterans. Then tap into any one of those nonprofit organizations that are available for that assistance. Then finally, you've got to start the conversation. You've got to create on every public facing aspect of your company. You have got to tell the story about what you're doing for a military affiliated candidate. So if you have a military program within your organization, it needs to be front and center on your LinkedIn page. If you have a Facebook presence, if it's on your website, it needs to be obvious what you're doing for a military affiliated candidate. And that will create a more welcoming environment for them to self-identify, both military spouses and veterans. So tell the story from the very beginning on every forward-facing platform you are on as a company.
Those great insights there. And I think it's one of the challenges I see in this community, and you all been touching on, is how does the community find, kind of where the jobs are, et cetera. And, we can talk about the networking challenges that military veterans and their families might have. At the same time, you could also see it as one of their greatest, strengths, because a veteran, many times, I'm speaking from my personal experience, took my call, didn't know me, took my call, wanted to hear about me, and I was obviously wanted to hear about them. And I think the same thing from the spouse's standpoint. I mean, it's just such a powerful, like Jen's words are just so powerful. And so just encourage anyone here who's, I guess, looking for that next job to reach out, network, whether it's someone or you're going to make a new friend today, the same kind of thing. So the community is here for you. And that's what I hear loud and clear from the panelists today. And then I guess, kind of last question really quickly, in what ways have you all seen success, whether you're, the two nonprofit panelists, how you've been able to collaborate effectively with the private sector to streamline military veteran pipelines, and Jen, maybe something from you on how, you all think about, working with different nonprofits. As you know, it's there are so many great nonprofits out there for military veterans, but there's only so much time for a company talent acquisition team to interface. So how do you think about something that stands out?
For Visa, and even when I was with Amazon, we had to really sit down and identify what were the core roles that we needed to fill, what were the skills needed to do that work, and have a relentless focus on matching those two things. We partner with Hiring Our Heroes because they have some particularly cool resources for those of us in tech that have been really helpful for us to get military candidates into some of our really unique and special programs, like our technical apprenticeship program. Hot off the presses, Eric. We got 3 more offers going out from yesterday's debrief that came from HOH. So I think knowing your core function, your mission, what you need to fill, and then working with the group that can get you that talent fastest. There's lots of great organizations. Visa also works with Special Operator Transition Foundation because we have found that we have a ton of special operators who got master's degrees and ended up in our consulting business, right? And so I like to tell people, look at where your veterans naturally are flowing, what roles and teams, and then build a strategy and find a partner to help you amplify and accelerate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just quickly, Ben. I think on our end, hiring our heroes, we aspire to be a big tent organization. We work closely with the private and public sector and corporations across America to create those pathways and opportunities. But the role of the nonprofit is not to serve candidates up on a silver platter and say, here you go. Here's your talent. You don't have to do any work. It's not that easy, and it's becoming increasingly more challenging as we look at skills-based hiring. Is that we have candidates who have great skill sets that don't necessarily look like candidates that companies are used to hiring, and so it is a team effort. I'll be quite blunt about that. It's why we have such a great partnership with Visa and a lot of other corporations, because we have people like Jen who are willing to help those candidates who on paper look a little bit different. So think about this. I mean, Jen is working with operators who are used to blowing stuff up and being snipers and all this stuff to be business analysts. So, and that just doesn't happen overnight. It happens because people like Jen are working with hiring managers to say, look, behind every operator is not someone who's just calculating how to blow stuff up, but is making detailed calculations and analytic, doing analysis to say, look, here's the environment and the landscape we're trying to work in. And they have also some of the backgrounds when they come out of master school, some of the educational part to say, look, we need to treat this candidate a little bit differently than we treat other candidates, because it's not necessarily a one-to-one skills match, but it is someone who we have a track record of tremendous success in the company, and we ought to be investing in taking calculated risks to bring these people into our business because they perform long-term better than some of our other candidates, and they're more mature and they can take the chaos that comes. So it's a partnership, to be quite frank about it, and we're here to create those partnerships with companies.
Yeah, great insights. Milinda, last words are yours.
So here at VetJobs and Military Spouse Jobs, we do something we feel is kind of unique. We have what are called Recruiter Connect specialists, whose job is specifically to go to the recruiters of organizations and companies that we have partnered with in the private sector and identify two things. Identify what are the skills you need with candidates, and then we will go to training partners and identify courses and skills that they need to learn so that we can help our candidates learn those skills. And then the second thing we do is we identify with those recruiters jobs that need to be filled quickly, and we will work with those recruiters to identify qualified candidates that might be a good fit for those roles. So it's based on skills-based hiring, but we're also trying to address finding the right candidates and then addressing the skills that are needed. Then the other thing I would recommend, and we've been partners with this particular program since 2013, is the Military Spouse Employment Partnership, which partners with new organizations in corporate America every single year. I think at last count, there were more than 500 companies, both nationally recognized companies and small businesses that are more local, that have committed to hiring military spouses. And most of those companies, yes, they're committed to hiring military spouses, but they also have a complementary program for veterans as well. And that keeps that conversation flowing. And within the MSEP partnership, there is a spouse ambassador network that is a group of nonprofit organizations that collaborate together to support the military affiliated job seekers. So we are communicating with each other on a regular basis. We are addressing those concerns with corporate America and talking with them about how they can connect with those military affiliated candidates.
Awesome. All right. So you heard it all here. If you're a nonprofit trying to find good insights, you've heard from two great institutions today and their leadership. If you're a nonprofit trying to get connected with a great employer, those Jen and her team at Visa are doing a tremendous job. And if you're an audience member who's looking for an opportunity, you know who to go to now. So this is something that's going to be recorded, and we'll have this for other folks. Thank you everyone for attending. Really interesting conversation, good takeaways. Let's keep the conversation going. In the next week or so, we'll send you a recap of today's events and a video recording. And we'll also share contact information of everyone who was here today, with your permission, of course. Have a great rest of your afternoon, and looking forward to talking with you soon. Thank you.